Okay. Buck. Cuck. Duck. Let's just try this again. Assassin's Creed Rogue is a video game in the Assassin's Creed game series that released on November 11th, 2014, which is the exact same release date as Assassin's Creed Unity, the canonical sequel to Assassin's Creed 4 and sequel/interquel to Assassin's Creed Rogue itself. Assassin's Creed Rogue and Assassin's Creed Unity were preceded by Assassin's Creed 4 in 2013 and Assassin's Creed 3 in 2012, and all of these were followed up by Assassin's Creed Syndicate in 2015. What I'm getting at here is that there were a lot of Assassin's Creed games in the mid-2010s. And because the words Assassin's Creed have already lost all meaning, I'll be referring to the subject of this video as Rogue from here on out. Rogue is my favorite game in the series, and one of my favorite games period. In my experience, discussions about Rogue are almost entirely contextualized by its surrounding titles, which usually limits conversation to broader discussions about the series. People will point out recurring characters from the other games, or they'll talk about how it has a boat like the other games. This is a logical reaction, given its story itself and its release proximity to the other games in the series. Rogue is also the 13th game in the series if you count mobile and spin-off releases, which is ironic given that
I make my own luck, Liam.
But this analysis is about this one, not the other ones. As someone that adores Rogue on its own merits, I want to analyze it on its own merits. Some comparisons will be inevitable, especially with how eagerly the game invites them. Expect full story spoilers for Assassin's Creed 3, 4, and Rogue. So, if you've made it to 2021 without spoilers and want to keep it that way, I recommend holding off on this in-depth analysis. Still here? Cool, then let's talk about Rogue. Content warning. Part of this analysis involves discussion of emotional abuse and gaslighting. Assassin's Creed is a series about the seemingly endless struggle between assassins and Templars. If you don't know anything about who those people are, it's kind of like Antifa versus the Illuminati. Rogue, as a side story, looks at what led the assassins to rock bottom prior to a redemption arc back in Assassin's Creed 3. At the heart of Rogue is a story about an assassin who became a Templar. This guy, Shay Cormac, who is the only character in Rogue with a real character arc. Well, except for literally you, but we'll get back to that a bit later. Everything in the narrative serves to make Shay's story more compelling, to build him up in some way and facilitate his transition from one group to the other. I find Shay to be a very compelling character, with a tragic character arc sold by solid writing and excellent voice acting. What really does it for me, though, is that it goes deeper than good man goes bad, though there is certainly plenty of that as well. What follows from here is a close look at how Shay develops over the course of the story, and when the game succeeds or fails at amplifying that story. Shay starts the story with some direct narration foreshadowing his eventual change, featuring a ham-fisted,
My name is Shay Patrick Cormac. This is my story.
But this is a narrative fast-forward, and we quickly learn that we're starting with Shay as a fun-loving, ally-brawling, ship-sailing assassin. That Shay will become a Templar is clearly telegraphed from the start. I wonder if this was the most effective approach. I imagine a version of this game where the twist was actually a rug pull. You didn't know it was happening until it happened, and I think that could have been really surprising for longtime fans and newcomers alike. But this version's fine too. Shay's established as someone who,
I make my own luck.
a weirdly specific twist on the luck of the Irish thing that never really seems to go anywhere. Shortly after, they give him a boat. We don't see how Shay knows how to sail or why he's got the skills of a pirate, but this doesn't really matter. The only real story problem here is who the random crew is to Shay. Outside of that, the sailing is more of a mini-game between the real action. It could be replaced by horseback riding or karaoke, and it wouldn't really change the pacing. And the sailing, for how superfluous it is to the plot, is really fun, so that helps. After Shay's introduced, you're introduced to you, the other character that I mentioned earlier. You see, Rogue is all being simulated at Extra Evil Google, and you're one of the mid-level game testers tasked with combing through genetic memories linked to the assassins throughout history. Didn't follow that? Doesn't really matter, honestly. Neat touch here, your character is never identified with a gender, skin color, or almost any other character-defining features. This is definitely on purpose to get as close as possible to a universal you. Rogue recognizes you're unlikely to want to hang out here long, so they establish some critical details about you and present day very quickly. You've got multiple bosses, you're literally expendable, they want you to play phone games, and the details of Shay's life are coming in piecemeal because of a series of bugs and glitches you're attempting to see through. After that, you're free to wander around Evil or Google to your heart's content, or just head right back into the game within a game. The game does a lot of heavy lifting very quickly to establish key story and gameplay elements, and in one sense, the intro is already over. In another, it's almost over. And in a third way, the intro isn't over till halfway through the entire game. As you return to Shay, he makes eyes at a couple characters that fans of the series will be excited to see, and you're given an opportunity to eavesdrop on them talking about a bad thing that's going to happen again in Shay's story. I really like this touch. The conversation is out in the open, but also kept from Shay. This says two big story things. The characters don't want Shay involved in this plan, and Shay doesn't care about being involved. Even if you sit here and listen to the whole thing, Shay has no comment, no internal dialogue, no reaction at all. This tells me Shay is not a planner, and that's really relevant to his arc. I love this part, but unfortunately the immediate afterward does not follow suit. They have a training section where 3 key assassins each teach Shay something about a game mechanic you'll be using, and narratively this is also supposed to teach you who these characters are. But it doesn't show us anything even remotely interesting about any of them. Hope is supposed to be brilliant and a master poisoner, but they don't establish either here. Liam is supposed to be a master marksman and Shay's best friend, neither of which are well examined. Kasegawase is a master hunter, I guess, but all he shows you is that you can air assassinate a deer and that there's a lame crafting menu. The story desperately needs a little more time to make you invest in these characters, because the latter half of the plot depends on caring about them, and it's just not there. I want to take a second to talk about the main gameplay of Rogue and how it interacts with the story. Shay runs, jumps, parkours, and stabs with the best of them. But it's interesting when you examine why they decided to make him an assassin that becomes a Templar, rather than just starting as a Templar. Shay had to be an assassin, because the mechanics of the whole series are about being an assassin. This is why Hatham used to be an assassin too, because you play as him for a little while in Assassin's Creed 3. The expert killer with a knife in their wrist that can fall into a pile of hay from 12 million miles and walk out without a scratch. This is assassin stuff. Or, as Gist puts it at one point in the game,
some homicidal circus.
This decision lets you play as the bad guy while using the mechanics of the good guy, which is a very interesting twist on the formula. But here's where it gets even more interesting. If you're fluent in how to play video games already, Rogue is pretty easy. Assassin's Creed games from this era were all criticized for being too easy. But with Rogue, this takes on a new dimension in the storytelling itself. You're meant to see yourself as a dubious figure, one who becomes more sinister over time and, by the end, is actively working against the best interests of the world. When you're also immensely powerful, this gives the whole story an extra layer of desperate inevitability. You're the Jack Torrance to their Wendy Torrance. You're the Nemesis to their Claire.
I I make my own luck, Liam.
The protagonist being incredibly powerful while also being a force of evil is compelling in a different way, because we as an audience know this power isn't simply improving things. There are consequences. This is why it actually adds something for Rogue to be easier than a lot of other video games. So, back to the plot progression. After Shay's training, he spends a significant chunk of game time assassinating a hodgepodge of Templars who don't really have anything interesting to say. Each one provides a piece of MacGuffin toward the assassin's goal of locating another piece of Eden, which, if you don't know what those are, they're essentially a series-wide MacGuffin. They cap this off with Shay and Hope helping Ben Franklin, who appears to be here for no reason other than the fact that he's Ben Franklin, and he helps them locate where the MacGuffin is, and off Shay goes. This stuff is all kind of unremarkable, though the gameplay is fun and carries the sections a lot. On a repeat playthrough, I did not really enjoy this part of the game. It feels a lot like busy work to me. By the way, did I mention it's been 3 years already? Because it's been 3 years already, and the game doesn't really do a good job of keeping track of time in general.
How much time has passed?
A few months, I think.
Wait, when was the last time we saw a date? Oh.
How much time has passed?
A few months, I think. That virus is cutting off our access.
Anyway, what the story should be doing here is spending as much time as possible establishing our relationships with the other assassins. And unfortunately, this kind of ends up being hit or miss. Only about half the Order are leveraged in a compelling way, and the rest are left to languish in obscurity at the end of a traitor's hidden blade. There are a few really good conversations with Liam, conversations that tell us a lot about Shay, but unfortunately not very much about Liam.
I make my own luck, Liam.
And we get even less about the relationship between these two. There was so little to go off of here that I can pretend Shay and Liam were former lovers, and nothing in the plot contradicts it. In fact, I did this for my entire first playthrough, and this fictional tension below the surface dramatically improves the plot. I, of course, wholly acknowledge I'm talking about a non-canon ship, like Destiel or John Locke, and yeah, okay. So, romance or not...
Well done, Shay. Keep it up.
Some kind of bond between Shay and Liam would have really made the impact of the story much, much stronger. Achilles, Hope, and Kisegawase don't even get table scraps here. Achilles is coasting on brand recognition from a game where he did have a character arc. Hope does basically nothing, and Kisegawase does less than Hope. There are two others in the mix, and these are two that Rogue uses quite effectively. One is Le Chasseur, who is not actually an assassin, but a contact. This guy appears and dies with no real personality beyond consummate professional, but that's not a problem. Le Chasseur's purpose in the plot is to be a bridge for Shay into killing assassins after his betrayal. I love the mental gymnastics this dynamic sets up, because Shay has two justifications for killing him. Le Chasseur isn't really an assassin, so that makes it okay in Shay's mind. Further, Shay points out that if he doesn't kill him, Le Chasseur will tell the assassins about Shay being alive. This comes up later when the assassins think Shay is dead, and Shay's ruthless adherence to survival being part of what pushes him into the Templar Order is absolutely fascinating. Unfortunately, nothing really changes later once the assassins know Shay is alive. I'd love it if there were some greater payout on the plot here for them actually discovering he's alive later anyway. But, you know, as previously pointed out, Shay in the plot is more like a Terminator to the assassin's John Connor.
I make my own luck.
The other character they use quite well during this section is the cantankerous assassin de la Verendre, who is positioned from the start for us to hate him. I actually love this character because he's just so charmingly contemptible. Having someone we can't stand in the Order is smart, because it gives us at least one bit of relief from what is otherwise an endless string of regrettable conflicts and sadness for Shay. With De La Verendre, we have a target we can kick back and, well, enjoy pushing off a boat. More on this character later, because he also ends up representing a key moment in Shay's development. The character we learn the most about during this part of the game is, appropriately, Shay himself. And this is where the game really shines. Shay is a blue-collar worker, which is pretty strange when you consider his skill set. But the story makes it work. Shay is a charming, simple guy who works just hard enough to keep his coworkers happy, and he smiles all the time. He laughs with his buddy, and he likes beer, and he likes boobies.
Where in the world has the most beautiful girls?
I suppose it depends on your vision of beauty. A damsel from Corfu and one from Oslo are as different as chalk and cheese, but both could be lovely.
See, opinions like that give a man a reputation for wisdom.
Yeah, thank you.
I would have just said Havana. The girls there have lusty buttocks and bosoms and feel no shame in putting them on display.
You know, also, like the archetype of a blue-collar worker, Shay doesn't really care about politics. And just like with the casual misogyny, this isn't necessarily framed as a good thing. In this game, politics are the political machinations of the Assassins and the Templars. Shay just doesn't care, and this is really important to the plot working the way it does. The killings he does for the Assassins are grunt work. Same with retrieving the MacGuffin pieces he's there to get. He's just a piece in the machine, but this is just a day of the job for him. Shay's being used by the Assassins, but he either doesn't see it or doesn't care, because it's his job. If you listen to Achilles and Adewale when they speak early in the game, you can hear that the person sent to get the last MacGuffin died, so they're trying again. And having so far only met with failure, they send Shay. They notably don't send Liam later, who's mysteriously unavailable. This is never stated explicitly, but they don't send Liam because Liam is not expendable. Shay is. So once Shay has done all this stuff, he's sent off to Lisbon to cause the 1755 Lisbon earthquake, which is a real event responsible for an estimated 30 to 50,000 deaths. I don't know how I feel about this decision to include this in the game as a plot point. Making Shay responsible for deaths he never intended is a necessary part of the plot and effective at kicking off what comes next. But tying it to a natural disaster that really happened feels weirdly tacky to me. One thing that's critical, though, is that the disaster is not personal to Shay or to Achilles. It can't be personal for the plot to work the way they want it to. This moment is what cements Shay's character. He cares deeply for the fact that people he didn't know, any people, died as a result of his actions under the Assassin's orders. Achilles argues this is for the greater good, but Shay can't abide people being sacrificed this way. Shay goes on to make a character-defining choice: sacrifice himself to stop the Assassins from doing anything like this ever again. A really neat note here about the optional objectives in this mission. Sometimes gameplay missions have things you can do if you want, which make the mission a little harder, but not much else. In story, the flavor of these objectives is that they're things that fully sync you with the character you're playing, which means Shay did all of these things. Most of the time these are kind of pointless, like one time when you're tasked with not touching the water on the way across the town. But in this mission, one of the optional objectives is used to say something interesting about Shay as a character. Do not kill anyone. Being here at this exact point means Shay didn't kill any assassins on his way out. Even in making this sacrifice to save lives, he's still concerned about each individual life along the way. He didn't choose to hack his way through 20 assassins. He left them all alive, even at great personal risk and at the risk of sabotaging the mission he's assigned for himself. That's still just who he is. So, racked with survivor's guilt, Shay hurls himself into the ocean with a piece of MacGuffin to make sure Achilles cannot ever make that choice again. He doesn't care about the broader societal implications. Whether Achilles is actually right is something the game trusts us to ponder on our own. But Shay's decision is clear, and we understand why he makes it. The narrative pauses after this to talk more to you, before revealing there's a post-story mystery Shay is connected to, some 20 years after the main game. These sections are neat, fragmented game chunks where an older Shay is in Paris, but we don't know what he's doing, and we won't know for sure until the game concludes. Then we're dumped back in on Shay, nursed back to health by an old Irish couple. It turns out Shay was brought here by a Templar named Monroe, and that the Irish couple's son was a Templar before his death. They don't state this explicitly to Shay, but it's incredibly obvious. Monroe was testing Shay by bringing him here, and now Monroe slowly leads Shay down the path of a Templar. Shay still doesn't care about the politics, and Monroe knows this. So what he does to persuade Shay is to offer him a chance to help people, and he does this multiple times. This continues to speak to Shay's character. He's given a second chance, a new lease, and he isn't out for revenge. Shay just wants to use his homicidal circus powers to help people. It's over the course of these next several missions that Monroe slowly grooms Shay toward the objectives of the Templars. And in this way, they use his natural moral compass and apathy for political details to turn him to their side. While Shay is helping people, he makes an enemy of Hope's forces, which include a new type of gameplay challenge called the Stalker. These enemies are the most compelling union of gameplay and narrative, possibly in the entire series. You use Shay's exceptional instinct to outwit enemy assassins, who ostensibly have the same abilities you do. These guys make you feel like the world is out to get you, that you're being hunted by the assassins. While the timing of this introduction is conspicuous, since the assassins are meant to believe you're dead, the payout and how this adds to the gameplay and narrative is phenomenal. So Shay is eventually persuaded to the Templars' side through conversation, mostly. There's also a contrivance here about Liam killing Monroe, which is meant to be the final straw before Shay turns into a Templar fully, but this beat hits with the power of a wet noodle, honestly. Monroe was boringly friendly, at least on the surface. I feel like they really would have benefited from some time developing Monroe further, but maybe they just didn't have time for it. I don't know. What I will say is that even with what little we're given, my suspicion is that Monroe is not just a friendly old mentor, but that he was putting forth a concerted effort to convert Shay from the word go. One interesting thing that happens over the course of time where Shay is persuaded to become a Templar, if the assassins had reached out to talk to him at any point, if they'd considered budging on what they were doing, or even explained their motives to him in greater detail, there's a really good chance Shay would have become an assassin again. But they don't. They don't try at all, even after they know he's alive. Instead, the assassins are laser focused on the thing Shay turned against them for to begin with. This singular obsession with some superpowered MacGuffin that made Shay turn on them. Because the assassins won't budge, Shay won't budge either. And the Templars offer him the redemption he so desperately seeks. A chance to save more lives by preventing this from ever happening again. They turn the assassin's own stubbornness against them and use it to manipulate Shay. Because outside of a few free-roam acts of altruism that aren't even really Templar sanctioned, Shay doesn't really help many people. In fact, Shay kills a lot more people on his quest to save people, including people he personally knows are good. But he's only talking to the Templars, and they're all telling him he's making the right decision. Shay has no eye for the big picture, even here, and the Templars take full advantage of that. Haytham, the charismatic leader of the Templars, gaslights Shay on multiple occasions in the pursuit of persuading him to the Templars' objectives.
A novel tactic?
He's saving his crew.
No. He's making a last stand. Let's not disappoint him.
And Shay never considers that Haytham could be playing him. Haytham makes the assassins look more evil by lying about their motives, and because Shay's been hurt so badly already, he doesn't question Haytham about any of it.
That's a hefty crew Achilles brought.
Doubt he expects all of them to survive these conditions.
That's bleak, but we're still outnumbered.
Shay feels deep shame for killing Adewale, who calls him out on his deathbed for his monstrous behavior. And Shay's just like, yeah, you're right. When Shay kills Hope, she only feels regret about what he could have been as she lay dying. and this really, really affects him. You can see it. When Shay feels doubt about killing Adewale, Haytham is immediately there. When Shay feels doubt about killing Hope, Gist is immediately there.
Look, Shay, by killing Hope, you not only saved yourself and half of New York from the assassin's poisons, you also learned the path we must take next.
These guys are ruthless in convincing him that what he's doing is the right thing, even when his conscience is telling him that something is actually really wrong. By the time the Templars have just about caught up with the assassins, Shay kills De la Verendre and the last piece of the puzzle comes out. Speaking of De la Verendre, I love the choice not to make him an early target for Shay. He's actually the second to last named assassin that Shay is responsible for killing in the story. They could have easily made him the first person you killed. They could have made him the easy bridge, where Shay kills the guy he hates before starting to kill the guys he actually kind of likes. But they don't make it that easy for Shay. By the time Shay kills De la Verendre, he's fully settled in with the Templars. Where the gameplay could have some cathartic payoff, Shay instead feels nothing. The man Shay once hated is now just an obstacle to be discarded, like the assassins have become as a whole for him, an obstacle to be discarded. When Shay confronts Achilles and Liam at the end of the game, the only two remaining named assassins, he's finally getting the payoff the Templars promised him. Shay is here to stop them from causing a disaster like they made him cause before. But Shay doesn't stop to look around. They're in a frozen wasteland, completely devoid of human life outside of those who came here. Even if the Templars never came, the assassins would have accomplished nothing. When Liam knocks the MacGuffin off its pedestal, another earthquake starts. But the only people at risk of dying are the people in the room. Haytham knows the MacGuffin was pointless, and Achilles realizes it too, though Achilles' change here could have been presented better by the script. As it is, it doesn't really make much sense for him to have a change of heart at the last minute. But Haytham wasn't here about the MacGuffin. He was here to finish killing off the Assassin Order. And Shay, so completely invested in their lives by now, fully believes he's here to save lives. This is all done fantastically, and almost none of this is stated directly by the text. You're left to figure this out on your own. In fact, I would fully believe a lot of other players have a completely different interpretation of this text. But this reading is powerful and tragic, and I love it. Somewhere this ending fumbles is the payoff between Shay and Liam, which I discussed a little bit earlier. I love that the objective is basically kill the assassin, like it was in the very first mission. This is great payoff for that Chekhov's gun. But there's no emotional weight in the exchange between these two. As Liam lay dying, he's just vaguely angry, and Shay doesn't have any real emotional depth here either, instead hitting us with the refrain of,
"I make my own luck."
Something that didn't really mean anything here or anywhere else in the plot. This would have been a great time to hit us with something about Shay's luck running out, or some sort of narrative payoff in which Shay realizes luck is maybe cursed for him or something, I don't know. I think this would have been the time to do it, and they don't. Shay shows genuine remorse and distress when he kills Adewale, and when he kills Hope. Here, it falls flatter than the expanding blood texture below Liam's lifeless body, and he's supposed to be the big character here that we care about. That's why they saved him for last. It's almost like the script knew it was supposed to do something like this, but maybe they just ran out of time. Obviously, I can't know that for sure, I'm just speculating, but all the pieces are here for them to have done something more with Liam, and they just didn't. The payoff in the final confrontation between Haytham, Achilles, and Shay is much more satisfying. Haytham is about to murder Achilles and fulfill his real goal, but Shay talks him out of it, arguing that Achilles staying alive will keep the assassins from looking for these MacGuffins again in the future. Haytham agrees and cripples Achilles instead, ensuring Achilles will never parkour after this. Brief tangent here, but the way they do this moment for Haytham is amazing. Haytham waiting until after the mission finished screen to then blast Achilles as soon as it starts playing again is such a great ruthless villain moment.
never forget what has happened here.
But to get back to the exchange, this whole thing feels like the surface text of a different argument. Shay isn't really arguing that Achilles will dissuade the assassins who remain. All three of the characters here know that the assassins are effectively finished. Shay is arguing for Achilles' life, and Haytham knows this too. But Haytham is ruthless, deviously so. He doesn't go along with this because he agrees with Shay, nor does he go along with it because he respects Shay, which I don't think he does.
This whole calamity could have been avoided if you'd only listened to me.
Disrespectful to the end. Yes, we've been working on that.
Haytham goes along with it because Shay is an exceptionally powerful tool for the Templars. And if Haytham murdered him in front of Shay, the illusion of the Templars would be broken. Shay's illusion would be gone. He would finally see the Templars for the villains they really are. So Haytham can't do it without losing Shay, and to him it's not worth it. After this point, Shay is fully a Templar, but not because he believes in their true ideals. Shay still doesn't believe in controlling the world through political machinations or anything like that. Shay still doesn't even believe in ruthlessly executing rivals regardless of circumstance. At least not yet. Neither side treated Shay with respect, and that's the real tragedy of this character. Shay was a tool from beginning to end, and none of his friends on either side were really his friends. Yet Shay now fully believes in the Templars and is perfectly ready to give his life up for them. This is when they choose to pay off the flash forward to 20 years later. Shay is shown assassinating a prominent assassin from a different Assassin's Creed game. Here, Shay seems more ruthless, comfortably lying to Ben Franklin to get what he wants. In addition, when his latest victim tells him the Templars are going to have a bad time, Shay's response seems more ruthless as well. He counters with,
"Then perhaps we shall start a revolution of our own."
In this scene, Shay, after these 20 years, seems to have become the brutal manipulator the Templars are really known for being. I like that this is left open to the player's imagination. We've seen how Shay was indoctrinated into the Order, and while it could be interesting to see that evolution to scary manipulator, it's a satisfying conclusion to a tragic story to know that's where he ends up. And this is where you have a place in the story, right at the end. Back in the present, the eviler Google wants you to use Shay's story to troll the assassins on their Tumblr page, which you do. Then you find out the really obvious twist that they're all Templars, and they want you to join them. You're given a chance to take the pledge yourself, or get a bullet. But you don't have to choose. The game lets you wonder and think about it yourself. It's not an especially deep arc, but it's surprising and interesting to me that the player surrogate is given this opportunity to reflect within the story itself. You're asked to consider what you would do with the information you've been given. Me? I'd take that ring instantly. I'm already stuck working at a crummy office job. I may as well get in on the Illuminati rewards package, right? Joking aside, I really like this as part of the ending. You've just spent an entire video game's worth of time hearing all the same things Shay has, being exposed to all the same lies and deceptions. When the game presents you the question of, do you want to be a Templar? It's hard to divorce yourself from Shay's point of view and remember just how terrible these guys are. The game has manipulated you into seeing the Templars as more sympathetic. They even have the spooky Bond villain-looking dude threaten to kill you, and it still doesn't come across as ominous as one might expect, because you feel like you already were a Templar. You were there as Shay became one. I mean, consider this, too. How many times in this essay alone have I referred to Shay as you, or you as Shay, as I've been making my points? This is speculation, of course, but I feel like this game was probably rushed to meet a corporate deadline. And for a game under such a tight time crunch, Rogue has a lot of really cool ideas about its universe and how it wants to tell you a story. It's not afraid to present something that looks one way at a glance, and completely another way if you look closer. This is why Rogue is one of my favorite games, because it successfully puts you in the shoes of someone who became a villain without ever feeling like you're just becoming a villain. For all my jokes about being the Terminator or the Nemesis, The game never has some big scary reveal where Shay is powering up with evil red eyes and a voice-modulated voice or anything like that. He's just a guy. Rogue invites you to look deeper and think deeper about its story and its characters. Rogue invites you to see Shay for who he really is, a man who thinks he's doing good. But if a man who thinks he's doing good doesn't pay attention to the world around him, and he listens to whoever seems the most trustworthy, he opens himself up to being manipulated by the most charismatic voice in the room. And when the most charismatic voice in the room is a ruthless manipulator who will lie to your face, well, a man who appears good can be led to do great evil very easily. And that's it for the main analysis. There's a lot more I could have talked about in regards to how this game plays overall. For example, I love this game's mission structure. There are almost no duds in the campaign, which is a rarity for a sandbox like this. Speaking of the sandbox, though, this game's open world has an over-reliance on repetitive side content. But I really wanted to focus in on the narrative for this video. Here are a few miscellaneous observations that I couldn't find a place for in that main video. There's not really a way to get around the fact that Hope was fridged. This game isn't exactly great with women. Hope is the only named woman in the plot, and her name is so on the nose it's ridiculous. When Shay kills Hope, he kills the concept of hope within himself. It's doofy, and it's on the nose. There's no reason there couldn't have been more women in this same plotline. Instead, the only woman is part of this weird dynamic where Shay killing the Woms means he's killed his hope for redemption. I'm able to look past this, but I could understand where someone wouldn't. There's a point in the plot where Shay diverges to help the Oneida, a nation of the Iroquois Confederacy, from some plot by the assassins of some kind. I'm not really clear what anyone was trying to accomplish here. But after Shay does this, the leader of the tribe walks Shay over to a big feathery door and says, "Hey, if you want to do a bunch of minigames, you can have this ancient armor set of my people." The plot then completely forgets about these characters forever. It reads like this tribe was included entirely to justify a dumb side quest where Shay can win an embarrassing Spirit Halloween costume. I'm not going to pretend to be an authority on if this counts as good representation or bad representation, but it's off-putting to me. I want to know more about this guy, because Shay promotes this guy, and nobody else, literally every time he adds a ship to his fleet. Is this guy one of 20 identical siblings that all work for Shay? Or is he so bad at his job that he keeps getting demoted and Shay just forgets and promotes him again? Speaking of the naval campaign, this naval campaign, it sucks, and it doesn't add anything to the narrative or the gameplay. It's like a weird bolted-on phone game that they wanted players to engage with real bad. Worse, it doesn't change anything. I spent 28 hours playing through this game over the course of 2 or 3 weeks, and this campaign still ended up only 2/3 done. Plus, the reward is the best melee weapon in the game, but it takes so long to get it. Like, even if I stuck it out and finished this for the reward, what am I going to use it on? When you're having the confrontation with Adewale, there's a part where Hatham and Adewale are yelling at each other from across the battlefield, arguing about events from other games and between games. I really like this section. It's a fun way to teach us a bit more about the characters as we're playing the game. It's like an audio log, but better because it's actually two people interacting in person. Finally, it's weird that Shay is the one protagonist I know of in the series that is allowed to kill civilians without desyncing from the Animus. This implies that Shay killed civilians on a whim, but that doesn't make any sense for the character they wrote. It only makes sense if you're designing an evil game for evil guys. I suspect that's why it's like this, because the concept for this game probably started as, play the bad guy, but they didn't write a conveniently evil character in Shay. His whole arc is around caring more for the lives lost in the moment than any greater plot. So it makes for a weird time when the mechanics directly contradict the story they're trying to tell. Thankfully, that's the only case of disconnect between gameplay and narrative that I can think of like this. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching. This is my second big video essay like this, and follows in the footsteps of a game that barely has a story at all. So this was definitely a learning experience for me. If you like what I'm doing, let me know, and consider helping me out with YouTube stuff. Like, share, subscribe, yada yada, you know, that stuff. Even if you don't, though, thanks for giving me your time and attention to have a chat about video games together. Take care out there, and remember, don't trust the Templars.